Well, good afternoon. Uh, my name is Ilda Sabito, and I serve on the advisory committee for the Hispanic Leaders Network. It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to this month's Hispanic Leaders Network virtual monthly luncheon presentation. The Hispanic Leaders Network, or HLN, is a group of Hispanic leaders who are passionate and deeply vested in supporting current and future leaders. Our vision is to develop and empower current and future leaders to make a difference in this community. Our mission is to provide a personal, cultural, and professional opportunities to inspire Hispanic leaders to serve and make a positive impact. The the HLN operates as a committee of the, the Syntex Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Today, the Hispanic Leaders Network welcomes Dr. Zaragoza Mito Diaz Espinosa. We will introduce Dr. Diaz Espinosa in just a few minutes. Before we begin, please mute your audio and use the Zoom chat feature to ask questions during this presentation. Also, there will be interactive activities in the breakout rooms during presentation. For the Facebook Live participants, you will need to be logged in to Zoom to participate. You can go to the HLN Facebook page to find the eBright Zoom registration link. Lastly, we want to share your name. We want to know who you are. We want you to share your name, affiliation, title, and optional, your contact information. Now, before we begin the program, and since this program is occurring during the lunch hour, I would like to ask Israel Lo Chamin, Associate Pastor of Spanish Ministry of the First Baptist Church in Waco, to begin the invocation.
Thank you. I wrote a prayer for this time, and will you please join me in this invocation. Lord God, we just come before your presence. Thank you for the leaders represented in this meeting. Thank you for including everyone so that we could all contribute to being a reflection of you. Thank you for being a God who doesn't discriminate. Lord, help us to see the things like you do and not discriminate against your people. I pray that you speak to us during this conversation to become more like you. I pray that we respect the diversity of making and embrace that we are all one. I pray that I took at people the same way you do. Help us to show your love. Amen.
All right, wonderful. My name is, thank you, Pastor Luachani. Good morning, everyone. My name is Fernando Arroyo. I serve as the Chief of Staff for the newly named Waco Family Medicine, which is formerly known as the Family Health Center. And I'm also an active part of the Hispanic Leaders Network. And it's a great, great honor to introduce our presenter today. Muchísimas gracias a todos por asistir. Dr. Zaragoza Espinosa, many also call him Mito, is originally from Waco, Texas, a proud product of Waco ISD schools, class of 1994. Me too. And he completed his undergraduate studies in history at Texas A&M University, and then he went on to receive a Master's of Science in Higher Ed and Student Affairs from Baylor University, and then completed his PhD in Higher Education Administration at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. The title of his dissertation is I'm Here for a Reason, Motivational Factors of First Generation Latino Males to Attend College. And Dr. Diaz Espinosa currently serves as a case coordinator in the Office of Equity, Civil Rights, and Title IX at Baylor University, which focuses on working with the greater Baylor community on creating an equitable learning environment where all can prosper and flourish. And he's worked in the areas of first generation college, student support, admissions, recruitment, academic advising, and diversity programs. And he keeps busy at the moment helping her raise a 6-month-old daughter, Luna, a precious name. And today, Dr. Diaz Espinosa is presenting Name Stories, Understanding Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Fernando. Those proud University Trojans, class of '94,
You
doing
know.
it again. Thanks everyone for spending this time with us this afternoon. It's really exciting. It's good to see so many familiar faces in the screens and on the chats. I know we all wish we could be in person together and do this face to face, but it's still good that we have this technology to be able to reach out. I was asked to kind of speak today specifically about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those are really big words that have a lot of academic philosophies behind it, and it kind of gets lost in the meaning. So I'm big on names, and I'll share with you a lot about my name and kind of the stories about my name. That's going to be the focus. But really, how does that connect to what diversity, equity, and inclusion is? So we can make this a more personal conversation, because names are something that we all share, and it's something that help us in our lives every day. Just to give you kind of a quick overview, this is what I'll do. I'm going to go into some general definitions, not because I don't think you understand these things, but so that everyone kind of has a baseline of what we're talking about. Then I'm going to share a lot of stories about myself, not too many, but a few. And then I'm going to turn it over to you all, so you all can also share some stories about your name as well and connect with one another. And then I'll bring everyone back and we'll go into some tips and tools specifically on how to utilize names in different spaces, whether we're in our classrooms, at our workplaces, or in our communities and families, and really think about ways that we can honor names and respect individuals' names. So that's the goal, really, is to make that tangible connection between something really big and something we all have to something that is more kind of always talked about, but not really fully understood by a lot. I won't be actively looking at the chat all the time, but please add any questions and comments. We'll get to question and answers kind of toward the end, or I can follow up with individuals. I'm going to leave my contact information. This is something I enjoy talking about, so we can have longer conversations as we go forward, but please ask those questions as we're going, and we'll try to get to those throughout the conversation. So this kind of came about out of a comment that was made in one of our leadership meetings talking about diversity. And there's a famous quote by Verna Myers, who's a diversity educator. And she said, "Diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance." So whether you're in your communities, your workplaces, your families, a lot of people talk about diversity and inclusion, and we keep adding more to that conversation. It usually centers around race and ethnicity right now, but also centers around gender and gender expression and identity. We talk about religion, we talk about states and hometowns. But the word diversity really gets used in a lot of contexts, but at the root of it, diversity just means a variety of people. So whether you're at a party, and I'll keep this kind of metaphor of the party going, there's going to be tall people there, short people there, some people dressed really nice, some not dressed so nice, some, making jokes and loud, others quiet. All those are different people that have different attributes and different, pieces of them that they bring with them to make it a variety or diverse. Inclusion goes one step further and says, hey, we're at the party, you're there, you're just kind of standing around. We want you to be a part of the party, so we're going to invite you to dance and being asked to dance. So now you're actually actively a part of this celebration and part of this party, and you get to be one of the other members dancing. This conversation is a little bigger than that, as we keep thinking more and more about our context in society and our context in our workplaces and our families. So we think about equality a lot, and equality would be everyone at the party dancing the same number of songs. Doesn't talk about how well we dance or we don't dance, or you might not even know that dance, but it's just everyone dancing the same amount of songs. Typically, when we think of equality, we think of that as a really good thing, and we want equality for everyone. But sometimes equality isn't always the goal. It isn't always the answer. You might not like the music. You might not be able to dance. You might have a bad back and you can't dance. So requiring and expecting everyone to dance the same number of songs to hit that equality level isn't always the best thing. So sometimes when we're talking about diversity and inclusion in our families and our workplace, we think if everyone's the same, if everyone's equal, doing the same thing, then nobody can be upset, nobody could be mad. But the reality is that equality doesn't always get us to where we think we want to go. So thinking about the party, everyone dancing at the party, you've been invited, you've been asked to dance. This idea of belonging is really hearing music that kind of sings to your soul. Like that's your jam. That's the song that's going to make you dance or make you sing along or whatever it might be. But belonging in that sense means that you're not only at the party, you're dancing, you're invited, an equal number of songs, but you're also hearing music that sings to you and you feel as if you're a part of that. Sometimes we try to force belonging and we will play songs that we think certain groups of people want to hear. So, you know, we'll anticipate, oh, they must be a fan of this music or that music, so I'm going to play this type of artist or this type of song. And we're projecting onto them what we think they want to hear. And sometimes we appreciate that, and sometimes we recognize that, and we're like, cool, that's, you know, they're thinking of me, they're trying to include me, trying to make me feel like I belong. But that isn't always the answer as well, because sometimes we get it wrong. So there's another step in this, in what's called equity. So if you think you've been invited to the party, you've been asked to dance, everyone's, you know, playing songs, they're hearing, you're hearing songs that make you feel like they're talking to you. Well, equity is feeling welcomed and empowered to actually go and change the music, whether you go up to the DJ and tell them you want to hear this song, or you have your own playlist that you dial into, and everybody is okay with that. So equity is really talking about fairness and justice, because it's me telling you what I need and what I want. These are the songs that I want to sing to my soul. You might think that you played Selena and therefore I should be happy, but you're playing Como la Flor and I wanted to dance to Bidi Bidi Bum Bum. And that's where that equity piece comes in, and you get to actually make the changes that you need for yourself or your community. And it's not someone else putting that on us. So equity is that fairness and the ability for us to stand up, take part in that conversation and say, this is what we need and what I want, because not all the time we don't recognize that. We can try to be representative, we can try to understand people and where they're coming from, but we don't always get it from their perspective. So having them actually actively take part in that is something that we want to do. Another way to look at the metaphor is to think about a symphony or an orchestra. The diversity is all the different instruments that are in the orchestra. Inclusion is that everyone's participating, all the different instruments are playing. Equality would be everyone's playing the same amount of notes. So if you think about that in an orchestra, that song might not always be what you want. But then equity is really advocating for what parts of the song should be played by what instruments, and having the musicians actually speak into that to create something together. And it's not just somebody imposing it. Somebody can create a playlist, somebody can create a song, somebody can do all these things at your workplace and tell you this is how we're going to do it. And it might be awesome, it might be perfect, it might really fit you. But equity is really inviting people to kind of have that conversation and join in with that. So this is kind of my metaphor that I built off of Verna's quote to talk about all these different aspects. But for me, I like to relate it back specifically to myself and see myself in these stories. And I like to do that with names, because as you heard through my bio, and as you heard Fernando introduce me, and people say, I've got what we call a unique name, and I've got a long journey in my name and my name story. Most of us have a name, we have name stories, we have nicknames that develop over time. So it's a good way to relate a lot of these ideas of equity and inclusion and diversity back to something that's a little bit more personal for us. So I'll jump in a little bit to my name story, and some people know me or know this, or you might know some of the people involved in my name story, but just bear with me and I'll kind of make some connections to some other stories. So I'm from Waco, Texas, and my parents were hippies. So this is a picture of my dad, mom, and my older brother at Cameron Park, just hanging out, wearing their bell bottoms in the good denim days of the 70s. My older brother's name is Spas, which for those of us who know Spanish and speak Spanish means peace. When I say my parents were hippies, it really talks about why we were named and what we were supposed to be named. So I was going to be Justo. And if you know Spanish again, that means justice. So we were going to be peace and justice. That was going to be our names. And we always joke that if we had a sister, they were going to be Libertad, or liberty. We were going to be peace, justice, and liberty, because those are things that my parents were fighting for and strove for during the civil rights movement, the Chicano history and Chicano civil rights movement. So we were going to be peace and justice. But my mother, being the strong Chicana that she is and fighting for equality and wanting us to be represented, She knew that I was going to go to white schools or be in white society, and they were going to anglicize my name, and I was going to be called Justin. And as a proud Chicana, she didn't want to have me running around being called Justin and the anglicizing of my name. So she said, if everyone would name me Justo, she was going to call me Justo, she would have named me Justo. But everybody was going to default to Justin in some way, and she just didn't want that. So the story gets a little muddy of when this change happened, whether it was on the way to the hospital or in the delivery room. But at some point, my mother decided to change what she was going to call me, and she wanted to name me after her father or my grandfather. Now, my great-grandfather named all of his sons after revolutionary heroes of the Mexican War. So my grandfather has brothers named Francisco or Pancho, Ignacio, Emiliano, other names that we find familiar. He ran out of first names. So when he got to my grandfather, who was the youngest, he started with last names. So my grandfather's name is Zaragoza, kind of named after Ignacio Zaragoza, the general who led the revolution for Cinco de Mayo and the Mexican troops. So we're named after Ignacio Zaragoza. My name is Zaragoza. And then my dad's name is Jesus. So my name is, or at birth was Zaragoza Jesus Espinosa. So my mother wanted to make sure that no one anglicized my name to call me Justin. So she named me this very long mouthful name that no one could really get wrong and say that in any kind of anglicized way. I'm very proud of my name now. It's something that I love telling the story, but it was a little rough growing up and being able to understand that because a lot of people couldn't pronounce my name. And one of those people was my older brother, who's 2 years older than me. My mother tried to get him to say hermanito, but all he could really ever get out at that age was el mamito. And that's where mito comes from. So before I could talk, before I could walk, before I even knew what was going on, my name was Mito. And in my entire life, that's really been my name, especially to my family. I've never heard my father call me Zaragoza. He's always called me Mito throughout my entire life. The only people that really called me Zaragoza were people that knew me at school or bill collectors or other legal documents. And I'll touch more about that in a second. So for all intents and purposes, my name is Mito. The story gets a little better and gets a little funny, and it's okay to laugh at this. When I was in kindergarten, my name was Mito. I signed my homework Mito. Everybody called me Mito. That was my name. But when I went to first grade, a shift happened, and apparently the teachers had to use my quote unquote legal name or my real name. So I show up the first day of school at Cedar Ridge Elementary, first grade, teacher calls roll. They get to the point of the roll where they say, is there anybody name I didn't call? Well, here I am, I raised my hand. And I've got a name tag, just like this red one that says, hello, my name is Zaragoza. So I tell the teacher, you didn't call my name. She says, yes, you did. I said, no, you didn't. We start arguing. I'm a little kid, so I started crying. So she called me up to the front desk, and I have no idea what she's talking about. So they had to call my mother, who had to then come pick me up, take me home to teach me my name. When my mother tells the story, she says she prepped me for this, taught me my name before I went to the first grade. I don't think so. I just didn't know my name. So there I was, a kid crying, not sure what my name was because they called me something I couldn't even pronounce. Got home, my mother instilled in me that was my name. Then I had to go back to school the next day. I always share this part as really being funny, but it talks a lot about the diversity and inclusion. I always said it's really hard to make friends when you don't know what your name is. And that's still true and it's still funny. And I made it through and I eventually became, a very gregarious individual who talked to a lot of people, made a lot of friends. So I overcame that. But it was still difficult to introduce myself because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to identify myself because the name they were using wasn't the name I was used to. And it took me a little while to understand that and get through with it. That still happens now. So I'm very specific about thinking about my workplace. So if you work in an organization, I work at Baylor and other schools and universities, we always do a thing where we go around the table and introduce ourselves and what department we work at. This is the most nerve-wracking part of my day a lot of times because I don't know how I'm going to pronounce my name. I look around the room and I try to get an idea of who's in the room, Do I say my name the way my mother says it and honor the fact that my mother doesn't want my name anglicized or didn't want my name anglicized, that's why she named me Zaragoza? Or do I try to fit into other people's mouth and make it so they can remember my name? So depending on the room I'm in, I will usually default to Mito or Mito, or I'll make some joke after I say my name, but I very rarely say Mito unless I'm in a room full of people that I think would understand my name. And I do this to acquiesce, and I do this to fit in, and I do this to try to make sure people remember me. But the entire time around that conversation, I'm not listening to what department other people are from. I'm not paying attention to what their name is. I'm just focused on my own name and how am I going to pronounce it? What hoop am I going to jump through? Am I going to pick today to describe what my name means? Are we going to sit there and have this discussion on how to pronounce it, how to spell it, where it's from, and all those other things? And most of the time, none of that happens. But inside my head, that's all I'm thinking about. And that conversation in my head and the idea of not knowing my name and how to introduce myself to people always lets me know that I'm in somebody else's space. If I'm at home with my family, if I'm in Corpus with my in-laws, I can say Mito freely. In HLN meetings, I'll say Mito freely, and I don't have to worry about it because I feel like I belong there and other people understand me and I'm included. But when I'm in what I call white spaces and oftentimes at work, I just don't know how it's going to be received and how it's going to go. So I'm always constantly thinking about that and trying to make sure that I'm being remembered and thought about. It's also the same thing when I get introduced to speak. When I speak in front of students, if they're Latino students, I say Mito, no problem, and I pronounce my name the way my mother says it. But if I'm in a mixed group of students or it's majority white students, or I'm speaking to faculty and staff who are majority white, then I always default to Mito or Mito. And I even make jokes and I say, you can't remember my name, just think me and To, to make it as easy as I can for other people to use my name. When all aware that strips away a little bit of who I am, a little bit of my name story and why I was named that. So it's always something that I have to fight for, always something I have to think about. And it really, when I sit back and think about it, it's really hard and it's really wrong and I'm doing a disservice because I'm buying into this idea that saying my name the way it's supposed to be said is somehow wrong and not right. And then it also opens the door to give permission to other people to mispronounce my name because that's the way I said it at the meeting, so I really can't be mad. So introducing myself really lets me know where I am and how comfortable I am and what kind of feeling I'm in. Some days I just feel rowdy and I'm gonna say my name the way I say my name and I don't care what anybody thinks or says. And I wanna have that discussion and make people understand how they make other people feel when they say they can't pronounce their name or their name's too hard. So some days I have that fight, other days I don't. The other part of my discussion and name story really is my last name. So when you first heard Fernando introduce me, he said Espinosa because growing up through school, that was my last name. But when I got married, I told my wife, I want you to choose what happens to our last name because in our society, we really default to women taking the last name of their partner or their husband. It's a tradition, it's historically done that way, it's always understood and has been understood for a long time. But my wife's very accomplished. Before we got married, she's a published academic. She's very proud of her name. Her family name in Corpus is very important, and she wanted to honor that. So I said, whatever you want to do, I just want our family name to be the same. So she chose to hyphenate, and then I hyphenated my name as well. So my last name is Espinosa, her last name is Diaz. So we are Diaz Espinosa. So I legally changed my name, social security number, ID, all those things. Legally now, my last name is Diaz Espinosa. Whenever I tell this story, especially women, they get really excited and they congratulate me and they pat me on the back and they say, how empowering is that? And that's awesome that you would do that for your wife. And they give me all these trophies. All the time, Crystal is sitting right next to me and no one says anything to her about the power it took for her to say, I want to hyphenate my name. And I want to honor my family name and carry that with me. So I get all the accolades, I get all the, the oohs and ahs, and everyone's happy that I changed my name, but no one ever acknowledges her sacrifice and what she did and how she did that. So oftentimes in our society, when we think about names, the gendered part we kind of lose because we're just accept that that's going to happen, that somebody's going to take their name. There's nothing wrong with taking a name if that's what you want to do and honor that. But just know that not everyone in your family, not everyone at your job is always going to do that. So you might have to look at policies at the school or policies at your office, or even conversations you have. When somebody says, you know what, I want to keep my own name. I'm proud of my name. I like my name. We often don't think about the woman's feelings in that. And that's something that our society, we need to think more about. Going along with that same gender conversation, individuals who are transgender often will change their name. You could work with somebody for 5-10 years before they transition and they change their name. And it's difficult to always honor their name and know, because you learned their name as one thing and now they're going by something else. Whatever you can do, and I'll talk more about tips and techniques in a second, whatever you can do, try to honor those names, because especially in the trans community, if you use someone's what we call dead name, it is very disrespectful and it erases their identity and who they are. So not only do our names communicate culture and race and ethnicity in our family, our position of feeling of belonging and inclusion, but they can also communicate our gender and where we fit in society. So understanding those dynamics when you talk to somebody and you get to know them and know their names, hearing that story, hearing that background and honoring that really helps them feel included and as they belong in that organization or that office, or they're a client of yours or a family member. Honoring those names is something that really means. We also hear a lot, especially in education, about individuals who have quote unquote weird spellings of names. So we want to have this uniqueness to us. A lot of people will insert an I or a Y or an apostrophe or a dash. And we tend to look down on that because it's spelled weird, when all we're trying to strive for is uniqueness. Watch your comments about people's names and jokes and things like that, because we internalize that. And for somebody like me, I think about my name all the time and how I'm going to pronounce it. So every time there's a joke or somebody makes a comment about my name, I carry that kind of with me as well. So those are a few stories to kind of connect, and I'll come back with some more tips. Next, I want to talk about another name story, and that is for our daughter, Luna. And I include this story for a couple different reasons, but really because I just want to show off how cute she is. So my wife and I had 3 miscarriages, and we had to go through 2 rounds of IVF before we could conceive and have our baby. So we often talk about Luna being our miracle baby, because it really took us a lot to get there. And when we were thinking of names, I carried that story with me about my mother wanting a Spanish name. And I told my wife, I really want to have whatever her name is going to be some sort of Spanish name. And then we started talking about our journey and started thinking about how dark it got for us, and we didn't think this was ever going to happen. We know that the moon is always there and it's always present and it shines and it leads people through the darkness. And that's why we decided to go with Luna, because she really guided us through, and her name symbolizes our journey and encapsulates what we did and what we got through and how we focused on her. And now that we have her, we know that it was all worth it. So that's what the idea of a name story kind of goes. One day we're going to share that with Luna. We hope that she's proud of that story. We hope that she carries that with us, because it's part of the legacy of our family and how we got there and who she is. And we hope that she shares that with her friends and family and shares that with people she's at school with, so that she's equally proud of her name as we are. Some people don't have a name story like that. Some people never asked. Elaine joked before the session started that she just asked her mother last night before this session why she got to her name and what her name was. So you might not know your name story, and you might not have as elaborate name story as Luna does, or as I do, or as other people. But usually there's something about your name that really connects to who you are as a person and communicates a lot about who you are. So what we're going to do right now is kind of transition, and we're going to have you all get into small groups. Each person's going to have about 2 minutes, but we want you to share with one another, if you're named after somebody, what that name is, what your name story is, if you know why you're given that name. And if you don't, you might have a nickname. It might have been given to you by a family member, or you were part of a sports team, or there's a favorite character in a book that you kind of identify with. somehow share a little bit of your name with the other people in your group, and spend, like I said, about I think we're gonna do about 8 minutes or so with that, and then we'll come back together and try to share some of those name stories as well. So Elaine, if you want to break people out.
Okay, here we go. Can everyone hear me?
I don't know. We'll see. I think it takes folks a minute to accept the change of rooms.
Hello, can anyone hear me? Renee, Stacy, Javanta? Anyone on?
Hey.
Hey, hey, I'm actually in two groups because whenever I prep for the meeting, I'm on my laptop, but I'm also on my phone because I want to see like what everybody else is seeing. So realizing that we're on Facebook Live and we're recording, so I think it's all here. So So tell me about your name story. Do you have a name story?
I do, and it's kind of an interesting one, I guess. So when my mom was pregnant with me, um, my aunt is a labor and delivery nurse, or used to be, right, for 40 years or whatever. Well, back then, sonograms, that was kind of new technology. So they had asked my mom, they said, well, my aunt and all her nurse friends were like, what kind of foods are you craving? Or you're carrying the baby low or high, or, whatever it was. And they, based on that, they figured that I was going to be a girl. And that was just, so they were going to name me Angela. And yeah, they painted the room pink, had showers and, pink clothes and.
Hey, Angela, so I thought I was old. I thought, I was pre ultrasounds and reveals and all that. So,
Yeah.
so I guess they didn't do an ultrasound or a reveal with you either. So
no, I'd surprised everybody. So, there was such a panic, I guess, when I came out that they just said, okay, we're going to change the A to an O. And I don't even have a middle name. They didn't even give me a middle name.
that's hilarious. Well,
Yeah.
So I called my mom last night. I always knew that if I would have been a boy, they were going to name me Neil. Because, yes, because I was born July 25th, 1969. Neil Armstrong had just walked the moon. And so they so wanted me to be a boy, so bad, because they were so proud of our country and our country having the first man to ever walk on the moon. And so they wanted to name me Neil. Well, I was a girl. And so they had to think of a name really quick. And so I'm going to tell you what my mom said. I said, Mom, and I called her last night and I learned this story last night. And I said, Mom, why did you name me Elaine? She said, why are you asking me this question after 51 years? I said, well, I already knew that you wanted to name me Neil if I was a boy, and I know why. She said, well, I'm going to be honest with you. She said, in high school, there was this beautiful white girl. Her name was Elaine, and I just thought she was just so beautiful. And I figured if I named you Elaine, that you would just be a beautiful girl. I'm like, okay, thank you. So yeah, so that's the story there. It's yeah.
Did you have a
She
middle
was
name?
right, wasn't she, Elaine? She was right.
About all that, Mama, but she said, well, you're beautiful. I'm like, oh my goodness. So that was her mind thinking. So yeah, so that's it.
Do you have a middle name?
Yeah, it's Frances. And so Frances, I'm named after my, I have two aunts. Their first name is Frances, but she said I was named after the Frances on my dad's side, my dad's sister, Frances. My mom has a sister named Frances too. And so that's another thing I learned last night was the whole time I thought I was named after the Frances on my mom's side. And she said, no, you were named after Frances on your dad's side. I'm like, well, as far as I'm concerned, I was named after both of them because I love them both.
It just depends on whose house you're at for Thanksgiving.
Yes. Mithil, you let me know when we're ready to close out too.
I think we're good now.
We're good?
I think we got
Okay.
enough time.
So let me kind of give the warning. I guess
Yeah,
I need-
and for us, it's like Abby on Jamie's side of the family. All of the kids have the same middle name, Ray, because that was Jamie's dad's middle name. So that's kind of what they do there.
All right. So let me broadcast all, closing out. Closing.
Christy.
I usually say 30 seconds, but I think when I hit that, it does it. Actually, it gives a minute. Okay. So participants have been given 60 seconds.
Elaine, I'm just going to say that I'm going to participate for a little bit because I have another meeting, and this is actually our lunch, but I didn't want to not participate. I'm excited to see everybody.
Thank you for joining. I'm glad you were
I
able
went
to
to
work it in.
hearings, so I'm sorry I was late. I was working.
Well, it's a great presentation, so you can go back and watch it
Okay.
on Facebook or go to the HLN website.
Okay,
And the
sounds great.
video will be there. A lot of really good information. I'm learning so much.
Okay, I think we're all back now, correct, Elaine?
I think so. Yep.
Okay. So thank you all for those who shared and were able to share. I'd like to ask for just a couple volunteers to really quickly share your name story if anybody wants to jump in and go.
Mito, I'll jump in.
Okay.
My name is Aranza Torres, and Aranza is actually not my complete name. My complete name is Aranza Su Torres. And I started off when I was very young. I cut that last syllable off just because it was so much easier. I mean, Aranza is already a mouthful for some people to say, and I've even had folks at my current job tell me, like, I'm not even gonna bother trying to say your name because I know I'm gonna mess it up. So it sucks, and I definitely relate to your feeling of how am I gonna introduce myself to this group of people? Do I say, hey, my name is Aranza, or do I say, hey, my name is Aranza, just so that it's easier for them to understand? I definitely relate to all of those things.
Yeah, and for us, a lot of times we're trying to be humble and nice and not make people feel awkward. So we really try to jump through that hoop to make them feel better. But that loses a little bit of our identity when we do that and we sacrifice that. So it's just one of those things that we learn very early, and we're conditioned to learn very early, and we try to maintain that as we go.
Can I say
Anybody
something,
else?
Dr. Mito?
Sure.
So my last name is Velasco, and when somebody says it wrong, I correct them. When I have students that try to anglicize their Hispanic surname, I say it correctly, and they appreciate it. And so I don't ever try to make my name anything that it is, because even though I don't have any direct lineage, I'm very proud.
And that's,
of my name.
very empowering to hear when you correct
and my
somebody
girls
else.
are too. My girls are too.
Yeah. My dad was always big on us pronouncing names
Yeah, I do that for my
correctly.
kids because we have so many Latinos here on campus, and I think it's important for them to see that their name is important, and we don't have to diminish who we are for anyone. But that's me.
And it goes back to that idea I said about sense of belonging and feeling like they're actually part of the university, school or university or wherever, to hear their names and hear their names honored. You also might have been in a group with somebody that you've known them for 10, 20 years and you've never known their name story or never thought about what their name means. So that's something else that you can find out. Sometimes you'll dig up some old rocks and hear some history and family histories that people may or may not be proud of, or different reasons they changed names. But I think it connects us in a different way when we know each other's names. Oftentimes at workplaces and organizations, we do networking events and icebreakers. The name stories is a good way, and this is one of my wife's kind of icebreakers that she uses a lot, because it's a way to humanize each other and really connect with one another and give a story to. And it's really hard to intentionally not pronounce somebody's name correctly if you know why they're named that way or know the history of their name. So that's another thing. It kind of adds that depth and that connection to you all. So thanks for those that shared. For reasons of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So here's some things you can do. And I put the Starbucks cup on here on purpose because that's one of the spaces that everyone's name gets messed up. Either they mess up how they spell it or they mess up how they say it. And if I go to Starbucks, I just give them initials because I don't even want to go through the idea of having to explain that. So that's a common space that where names kind of get chopped up. As much as you can, and this is hard, but as much as you can, commit to pronouncing your own name the way you want others to. This is something, as Aranza and I were sharing, that we don't often do, and I'm guilty of that because I'm trying to fit into other people's mouths. But it's something that the more we do it and the more we anglicize our name or we don't honor our own names, it gives other people permission. So as much as you can, practice that and try to do that as much as you can, even though sometimes it's hard or scary. Give people ownership and allow them to tell you how they want you to call their name. So give them that power. That goes back to that equity piece and allowing them to define kind of how they say that, and then honor that. If they want you to speak it in a certain way, as difficult as it is, honor their name and really try to connect with them to make sure you do that. Practice saying the names, continue to practice and make an effort. Even if you continually get it wrong, but you're making an effort, it communicates to them that they're valued enough that you're willing to practice and you're willing to invest that time. Resist the urge to give other people nicknames without kind of their own meaning. If you're just giving us nicknames to shorten our names and there's not really a reason for the nickname, it really diminishes kind of what my name is and shows me that I'm not there. Especially with names that we think of as quote unquote foreign names or non-biblical names, resist asking what a name means because sometimes that puts us on the spot and we just don't want to always have to explain to you what our name is. It's not my job to always tell you what my name is. So ask them to share their stories, ask them to give their name story if they want, but don't just say, what is that? What does that mean? Because we wouldn't ask somebody whose name's Sarah or John or Fred what their name means because it's just a name. So honor those names. It doesn't always have to be a meaning to it. When you tell somebody that's too hard or I can't say that, I'm not even going to try, it just lets me know that I'm not valued enough for you to invest that. I work at a university and I have professors who are professors in chemistry and engineering and memorize all this information and these names of people from German descent and other things. And when they tell me that my name's too hard, it lets me know that what's hard is the effort to honor my name because you'll say all these other things, right? And memorize all these other things. But for some reason, my name is just too much for you to invest in. You can use phonetic spelling. So whether in your email signature or I think on Facebook now and Twitter, they have a space where you can put phonetic spelling of your name so that people can read that and then be able to honor your name and say it the way that you can. Pay attention to spellings. So a lot of times in different jobs I've had, I've gotten checks that were made out to Mito, and I couldn't cash those because legally that.
Mito, you're muted. Oh.
Okay, did I come back?
Yes.
Okay, so think about paying attention to how you're spelling people's name because legally they might not have identification and pay attention to that. Oftentimes I get upset. I email somebody and they email me back and they misspell my name in email because it's right there in the email signature. It literally says my name. So you can put forth that little effort to know how to spell my name and copy and paste if you have to. But really pay attention to that because it can cause problems for us, especially in a legal context or financial context. There are some web resources. Obviously, you can Google everything now to get ideas of how to say names. Here's a few of them. I'm not telling you to use these if you don't want to, but there are resources out there. Namecoach.com, you can actually create a name badge. It will record you pronouncing your own name, and you can include that as a signature in your email. And then people can click on that, hear you pronouncing your own name. And then the idea is that you can practice saying the name the way they say it, that you can honor that. But Name Shouts, Pronounce Names, and Name Coach allows you to enter names, and then they'll give you different phonetic spellings and sayings, and then different countries of origins might pronounce names differently. So you can look through that, especially if you're working with clients or at your church or at a school and you want to make sure you get names right, or if you work with a lot of international individuals or people that have names that are different from you and your background, you can use some of these resources to really understand that. And as Dr. Velasco was speaking, a kid's face will light up if you use their name correctly and pronounce their name the way that their names are pronounced at home or the way they pronounce their name. It really builds a connection and lets them know that you're invested enough in them as an individual to pronounce their name. And that's where that sense of belonging and that equity come in to include them as part of the whatever organization that it is you're a part of. Here is my contact information. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit. As I mentioned, this is part of the work I do, and I've been doing this for a long time. If you've got questions, you want resources, there's tons of books and articles. We can go into a lot of tangents about how this impacts jobs and getting paid and the legal sense and defendants. There's just a lot of information on how names impact individuals. So if you want to talk more about that, I'm open to that, or we can connect on social media as well and post articles and things, oftentimes talking about names or diversity and inclusion. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to stop sharing. And then if there's any questions or anything that I can help answer, I'm happy to do that. And if not, we can go to closing, depending on what we want to do.
So am I up, Elaine?
I think so.
Thank Dr. Diaz Espinosa, thank you so much. It was such a cool exercise. The group I was in, two folks, one who is in Eugene, Oregon, and another in London, Vivian and Chris, and their stories are fascinating. Vivian, culturally, they have, she's African, and then they have a work name and then their home name. And just really great. And then also with Chris, her last name, it looks like it's Gallegos, but the pronunciation is, I'm going to mess it up, Chris, so please correct me, not Nalago. So this is a fascinating topic, and appreciate you taking the time and the effort to have the slides together and really just sharing the work that you get to do. In fact, this week I had one of your students from HSA in my office, and asked him to join us today. Of course, he was being a good student. He's in class right now, but he said he'd watch the Facebook presentation later. But Leonardo, yeah. And so just really grateful for all the work you're doing, and happy that we can share this with. It looks like we're sharing across the world, and we got folks from London, upper east, West Coast. So great stuff. I am Alfred Solano. I serve as the CEO for the Syntax Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which HLN is a committee of. One way to stay in touch with what the Chamber is doing is via our e-newsletter. So I'm going to hit in the chat right.
Alfred, you're muted, sorry.
I hit the space bar to send a message. I just send in the chat a link. If you'll text the letter CTHCC to the number 22828, you'll be signed up for our newsletter. And in the newsletter, you can stay abreast of what the activities of the Chamber. This event today clearly had the registration for that there. The Syntax Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has been in Waco, Texas for 45 years. So we have a great history in Waco. We have a fantastic board that's serving today, a lot of local folks that have great interest in making sure that our community is well represented in leadership roles. That's the purpose of HLN. Secondly, we're concerned with wealth building. One of the projects we're working on is the development of the LaSalle Avenue corridor. It's where our office is. And so be looking if you know of folks who will be, I anticipate in the next few months, hiring someone to serve as an economic developer working out of the Chamber for that, specifically for that task. We have, as you all probably know, the community has entrepreneurs. There are a lot of Spanish-speaking businesses in our community, and we want to make sure that the Chamber is an open door for that community. So in an effort to do that, we're partnering with a group called WeBo. It's a workshop in business opportunities. It's a 50-year plus old organization based out of Harlem, New York. And they've been doing this work for a long time, but they're going to allow, we're going to have the very first Spanish version of WeBo in Waco, Texas, as early as April. So we're efforting. The reason I bring that up is, folks who are looking, who are in business, maybe they're looking for that extra hey, some connection points, the curriculum. I'm happy to describe that to them if you have folks who you would like to recommend. So I am so appreciative of all of you for being here. I'm pretty appreciative of the ability to close the event. Mito, thank you again. Ilda, Elaine, the whole advisory team, always enjoy being with you, even though it is virtually. So if there's not anything else, I will just say thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you, and be careful.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all. Still got people joining, Elaine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alfred. Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you as well. It was so much fun. You got a second, Elaine?
I'm about to just stop the recording. Just 1 second.